Look, I need to get this off my chest because what happened 3 months ago still has me furious and I'm not done dealing with these people yet. You guys are going to lose your minds when you hear this absolute betrayal. And honestly, I need to know if what I'm planning next is justified or if I should go even harder. So here's the setup. I'm 28, software engineer, been with Adelaide for 2 years. We met through mutual friends at this gaming convention, and she seemed perfect at first. Shared interests, similar sense of humor, the whole package. Things moved fast and we were living together after 8 months. Everything was going great until she dropped the pregnancy bomb on me last October. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Right when she told me she was pregnant, I had just gotten the opportunity of a lifetime. My company offered me a senior developer position at their Tokyo office. We're talking $180K salary, full relocation package, housing allowance, the works. I had been working toward international experience for years, and this was literally my dream job. But Adelaide started crying about how she needed me here for the pregnancy, how she was scared, how we needed to start building our family together. Being the complete idiot I was, I turned down Tokyo, told my boss I couldn't relocate because of family obligations. They understood, but made it clear this opportunity wouldn't come around again anytime soon. Adelaide was so grateful, kept telling me what an amazing father I was going to be, how we were going to build this perfect life together. She even started talking about marriage after the baby came. Fast forward to January and she's about 6 months along. I'm working extra hours to save money for the baby, looking at bigger apartments, doing all the responsible future dad stuff. Adelaide had been doing these prenatal yoga classes twice a week and always came home talking about how wonderful her instructor, Maria, was and how supportive the other moms were. She also mentioned this guy, Ryan, who was apparently expecting his first kid around the same time as us, and how they had become good friends because their due dates were so close. Here's what I should have picked up on, but was too trusting to see. Adelaide had gotten really secretive about her phone. She'd take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. When we watched TV together, she'd be constantly texting someone and would get weird when I asked who it was. Always said it was just the mom group chat or her sister checking in. She also started staying out later after her yoga classes, saying the group would go get smoothies or talk about baby stuff. But the real red flag was how she'd been pushing me to set up direct deposit from my paycheck into her account because she was handling all the baby expenses and doctor visits. Said it would be easier for budgeting. Like an absolute idiot, I agreed and had been putting most of my salary into her checking account for months. Then there was the inheritance situation. My grandmother passed away in December and left me $85K. Adelaide knew about it and kept bringing up how we should put it somewhere safe for the baby's future, maybe in an account she could manage since she was better with finances than me. I hadn't done anything with the money yet because something felt off about how eager she was to handle it. Everything came crashing down on a Wednesday evening in late January. I had left work early because I wanted to surprise Adelaide by setting up the crib we'd bought the weekend before. She was at her yoga class and wouldn't be back until around 8 o'clock. I'm in the nursery with the instruction manual, feeling all excited about becoming a dad when I hear her laptop chiming from the bedroom. She'd left it open on the bed and forgotten to mute Discord. Now, normally I wouldn't even look, but the notification sound kept going off every few seconds, and it was driving me crazy while I'm trying to focus on these complicated crib instructions. I walk over just to close Discord and stop the noise. But I see she's got this voice chat going with someone named Ryan Gamer, 23, the same Ryan from her yoga class. I should have closed it right then, but something made me put on her headset just to see what they were talking about. Maybe they were discussing baby stuff or needed help with something. What I heard instead made me understand what betrayal actually feels like. Adelaide is laughing and saying something about how I was such an easy mark. How she couldn't believe I'd actually turned down Tokyo for her fake pregnancy timeline. Then Ryan starts going on about how clever she was to line up the inheritance timing with the pregnancy reveal and how perfect it was that I'd been putting my paycheck directly into her account for months. But here's the part that made me see red. Adelaide tells him that the prenatal yoga classes don't even exist. She's been spending those afternoons at his apartment. Then she says, and I swear I'm not making this up, that she's been planning this whole setup since last summer when she found out about the Tokyo opportunity from my work laptop. She specifically got pregnant by Ryan and timed the announcement to sabotage my career move. Ryan thinks this is absolutely hilarious. He's talking about how stupid I must be to think the baby is mine when Adelaide hasn't let me touch her in over a year. They're both cracking up about how I've been working extra hours to save money that's going straight into their joint account for when they disappear after the baby comes. Adelaide even mentions how she's already filled out paperwork to add Ryan's name to the birth certificate and set up child support claims against both of us. The conversation keeps going and getting worse. Adelaide tells Ryan about how she's been slowly moving her important stuff out of our apartment into storage and how she's already found them a place together in the next state over. They've apparently been planning to disappear right after the birth, leave me with nothing, and hit me for child support while building their new life with my inheritance money and all the savings I've been putting into her account. Ryan asks her what she's going to do about the furniture and stuff in our apartment. And Adelaide just laughs, says she'll figure out a way to take whatever has value and leave me with the lease and the bills. Then she mentions something about forging my signature on some insurance documents so they can cash out policies after they leave. I'm standing there with this headset on listening to them plan out how they're going to destroy my entire life. And something just clicked in my brain. Not rage, not sadness, just this cold calculation of exactly how I was going to handle this situation. See, Adelaide made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was the same trusting idiot who'd given up Tokyo without asking questions. But she had no idea that I'd been suspicious for weeks and had already started making my own preparations. I quietly closed Discord and went back to the crib instructions like nothing happened. When Adelaide came home an hour later, I acted completely normal, asked about her yoga class, how she was feeling, the usual routine. She gave me some story about how Maria had taught them new breathing techniques, and how Ryan's wife was worried about her due date getting moved up. The lies just rolled off her tongue so easily, and I sat there nodding and smiling while calculating exactly how I was going to dismantle everything she'd built. What she doesn't know is that I've been documenting her behavior for weeks through my work's private investigator resources. What she doesn't know is that I never actually put the inheritance money into any account she could access. And what she really doesn't know is that the Tokyo position, I never officially declined it. I just told them I needed time to sort out some personal issues. Adelaide thinks she's been playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she's about to find out that I've been playing an entirely different game this whole time. Because tomorrow I'm making some very important phone calls. And by the end of this week, her perfect little plan is going to collapse in ways she never saw coming. Anyone else ever catch their partner planning to destroy your life while you're literally building a nursery for what you thought was your kid? Because I'm about to show Adelaide and Ryan exactly what happens when you try to scam someone who's been 3 steps ahead of you the entire time. Update 1. The response to my first post was insane. Over 2,000 comments, inbox still exploding. Shout out to everyone telling me to document everything and get a paternity test. Way ahead of you on both counts. And to whoever said Adelaide sounds like a sociopath who's done this before, you might be onto something that I'm still investigating. But here's what you all really want to know. What did I do next? Well, buckle up because the last 5 days have been absolutely wild and Adelaide still has no idea what's coming for her. So, remember how I said I'd been suspicious for weeks? Here's what I didn't mention in my first post. Back in December when my grandmother died, I didn't just inherit $85,000. I also inherited her house. It's this little 2-bedroom place about an hour outside the city that's been in our family for decades. Adelaide knew about the money, but she had no clue about the house because I never told her about it. See, my grandmother's lawyer had contacted me separately about the property and mentioned that the previous tenants had moved out and it needed some work before it could be rented again. I've been going there on weekends when Adelaide thought I was at my buddy Maxwell's place helping him with his car. Instead, I've been fixing up the house and getting it ready for what I knew was coming. The morning after I overheard that Discord conversation, I called in sick to work and drove straight to the lawyer's office. Told him I needed to expedite the property transfer and get everything moved into a trust that Adelaide couldn't touch even if we were married. Cost me $3,000 in legal fees, but it was worth every penny to know she couldn't get her hands on that asset. But here's where it gets really good. While I was at the lawyer's office, I also had him draft up a lease agreement for the house. Not because I was planning to rent it out, but because I was going to need a place to live very soon, and I wanted everything completely legal and documented. That afternoon, I went to the bank and opened a completely new account at a different bank under just my name. Then I transferred my actual inheritance money into that account along with about $15,000 I'd been keeping in savings that Adelaide didn't know about. The money she thought she had access to, I left just enough to cover her next few weeks of expenses so she wouldn't get suspicious. Now, here's where I started getting strategic about the financial pressure. Adelaide had been putting all those fake yoga class expenses on a credit card that I was a co-signer on. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd charge about $60 to some wellness center that I now knew was fake. Over the past 4 months, that added up to almost $2,000 in charges. So, I called the credit card company and reported unauthorized use of the card. The customer service rep explained that since I was a co-signer, I could dispute any charges I hadn't personally authorized. Within 48 hours, they froze the card and opened a fraud investigation. Adelaide was going to find out about this the next time she tried to use it, which would probably be this Thursday when she was supposed to go to her fake yoga class. But I wasn't done with the financial stuff yet. Remember how I mentioned she'd been pushing me to set up direct deposit into her account? Well, what she didn't realize is that I'd been keeping records of every deposit and tracking where the money went. Turns out Adelaide had been moving significant amounts into a savings account I'd never heard of. When I checked the statements she'd left lying around, there was over $12,000 in there that had come from my paychecks. So, I did something that I'm pretty sure was completely legal, but definitely ruthless. I called my HR department and told them I needed to update my direct deposit information due to security concerns with my bank account. By Wednesday afternoon, my entire paycheck was being deposited into my new account instead of hers. Now, for the really satisfying part. Thursday morning, Adelaide gets up and goes through her normal routine, kisses me goodbye, tells me she'll see me after yoga class. I'm working from home that day, and around 2 p.m., I get a text from her that just says, "Call me now." I let it ring a few times before answering, and Adelaide is absolutely freaking out. She tells me that her credit card got declined at the store, and when she called the bank, they said there was a fraud investigation. She's trying to stay calm, but I can hear the panic in her voice as she asks if I know anything about it. I tell her that's really weird and maybe she should call them back to get more details. Adelaide says she's going to skip yoga today and come home to figure out what's going on. Perfect. I needed her home anyway for what came next. When Adelaide gets home around 3 p.m., she's got all these bank statements and credit card bills spread out on the kitchen table. She starts explaining to me about how there must be some mistake with the fraud investigation and how we need to call the bank together to get it sorted out. The whole time she's talking, I can see her getting more and more nervous because she knows those yoga charges are fake. That's when I decide to push her a little bit. I ask her to show me exactly which charges were disputed so I can help her figure out what happened. Adelaide gets really flustered and starts talking about how it's probably just a computer error and how she doesn't want to waste my time with bank stuff. But I keep pressing her, asking to see the specific charges because I want to help resolve this. Finally, Adelaide shows me the statement, and I point to one of the yoga class charges. I ask her which location this charge is from because I've been thinking about maybe joining a gym myself, and her yoga place sounds really great. Adelaide starts stumbling over her words, giving me this vague description of some wellness center downtown that she can't seem to remember the exact address for, so I pull out my phone and start looking up yoga studios in that area. I'm asking Adelaide which one it is while I'm scrolling through Google results, and she's getting more and more panicked because obviously none of these places match her fake story. She finally says that maybe the charge shows up differently on the statement than the actual business name. But here's where Adelaide made a huge mistake. She tries to end the conversation by saying she'll just call the yoga studio tomorrow to get a receipt that proves the charges are legitimate. So I tell her that's a great idea and I'll drive her there tomorrow so we can sort it out in person. I even offered to talk to the instructor, Maria myself, to see if she can help with the bank situation. You guys, Adelaide went white, like completely pale. She starts backtracking immediately, saying that she doesn't want to bother Maria with financial stuff and how she'll just handle it herself, but I keep insisting that I want to help and that it won't be any trouble to drive her there. Adelaide is trapped and she knows it. She can't give me an address because the place doesn't exist. She can't let me talk to Maria because Maria doesn't exist. And she can't explain why she's so reluctant to involve her yoga instructor in resolving what should be a simple banking error. That's when she tries a different approach. Adelaide tells me that she's been feeling really stressed about money lately and asks if I've gotten my paycheck deposited yet this week. She wants to check our account balance to make sure we can cover the rent and other bills while the credit card situation gets resolved. I tell her, sure, let's check the account balance together. We log into her online banking and Adelaide immediately sees that my usual deposit isn't there. She asks me if there was some problem with my paycheck and I explain that I had to update my direct deposit information because of security concerns at my bank. Adelaide asks what kind of security concerns and which account my paycheck is going into now. That's when I tell her that I've opened a new account for better fraud protection and that all my financial stuff is being moved there. Adelaide tries to stay calm, but she's clearly panicking because she just lost access to my income. She asks if I can add her to the new account so she can still handle the household expenses and baby costs. I tell her that's definitely something we should discuss, but that I want to get the credit card fraud situation resolved first before we make any other financial changes. Adelaide realizes she's losing control of the situation and starts getting more desperate. She tells me that she's been managing our finances really well and that it doesn't make sense to complicate things with multiple accounts. She even suggests that maybe I should just transfer everything back to her account since it's easier for her to track expenses while she's pregnant. But I just keep redirecting the conversation back to the yoga studio and how we should go there tomorrow to get documentation for the bank. Adelaide gets more and more frustrated until finally she snaps and tells me that she can't go to the yoga studio tomorrow because Maria is out of town and the place might be closed for renovations. That's when I know I've got her completely cornered. So, I tell Adelaide that's no problem. We can just call the studio directly to ask about the charges. I even offer to look up the phone number for her. Adelaide realizes she's trapped and starts making excuses about how she's too tired to deal with this today and how we should just wait for the bank to resolve the fraud investigation. But the damage is done. Adelaide knows that I'm asking too many questions about her yoga story. And she can see that I'm not just going to drop the financial stuff. She's trying to figure out how to keep her scheme going while I'm systematically cutting off all her access to my money. What Adelaide doesn't realize is that this is just the beginning. Tomorrow, I'm implementing phase 2 of my plan. And by the weekend, she's going to discover that everything she thought she had control of is gone. And Ryan, that piece of garbage, has no idea that I've been building a case against both of them that's going to destroy their perfect little future together. Stay tuned because tomorrow's conversation is going to be epic. And Adelaide is finally going to realize that she's not the only one who knows how to play games. Update 2. You guys are absolutely savage in the comments and I'm here for all of it. The person who said Adelaide probably targeted me specifically because of my inheritance and job prospects was spot on. And whoever predicted she'd try to flip this around and make herself the victim, you're about to see exactly how right you were. So yesterday was the day I decided to stop playing games and confront Adelaide directly about everything. But first, I had to put a few more pieces in place because I knew she was going to escalate once she realized I was on to her. Friday morning, I called my company's Tokyo office and had a long conversation with my would-be boss there. Told him I'd had some personal situations resolved and wanted to know if that position was still available. Turns out they'd been holding it open for exceptional cases and were willing to fast-track my transfer if I could be there within 2 weeks. I told them yes immediately and started the paperwork process. Then I called a moving company and scheduled them to come Monday morning to pack up everything that belonged to me. Furniture, electronics, clothes, everything. The stuff that was jointly purchased or belonged to Adelaide could stay. But I was taking anything that was mine or that I'd paid for. But here's the really strategic part. I also contacted the landlord about our lease situation. Our lease was up for renewal next month. And guess whose name was the primary on the lease agreement? Adelaide was just listed as an occupant, so I told the landlord I wouldn't be renewing and gave him proper notice. Adelaide had no idea that in 30 days she'd have nowhere to live unless she could qualify for a new lease on her own. Around noon, Adelaide came home from running errands, and she seemed really on edge. She'd obviously been trying to figure out how to handle the credit card situation and the missing paycheck without admitting she'd been lying about everything. She suggested we sit down and have a serious talk about our finances and the baby preparations. I told her that sounded like a great idea because I had some things I wanted to discuss, too. We sat down at the kitchen table and Adelaide launched into this whole speech about how she'd been feeling disconnected from me lately and how she was worried we weren't communicating well about important decisions. She said she wanted to be completely honest with me about some concerns she'd been having. Then Adelaide tells me that she's been worried about my commitment to our relationship because I'd seemed distant and secretive recently. She said she felt like I was making major financial decisions without consulting her and that it was making her feel insecure about our future together. I let her finish this whole performance before I responded. Then I told Adelaide that I appreciated her being honest because I'd also been having some concerns about our relationship that I wanted to discuss. I said I'd been noticing some inconsistencies in things she'd been telling me and I wanted to give her a chance to explain. Adelaide immediately got defensive and asked what kind of inconsistencies I was talking about. So, I pulled out my phone and opened up a recording app. I told her I wanted to record our conversation so we could both refer back to what was said later and make sure we were on the same page about everything. You should have seen her face when I hit record. Adelaide started objecting immediately, saying that recording conversations was a violation of trust and that she didn't understand why I felt the need to document our personal discussions, but I just calmly explained that I wanted to make sure we were both being completely honest with each other and that having a record would help prevent any misunderstandings later. Adelaide realized she couldn't refuse without looking suspicious, so she agreed, but she was clearly uncomfortable. Then I started asking her specific questions about her yoga classes. I wanted her to tell me exactly which studio she'd been going to, what the instructor's full name was, and what specific techniques they'd been learning. Adelaide started giving me these vague, contradictory answers. She said the studio was called something like Wellness Center or maybe Mindful Movements. She wasn't sure of the exact name. The instructor was Maria something. She couldn't remember the last name. They'd been doing breathing exercises and basic poses, but she couldn't really describe any of them in detail. Every answer she gave just dug her deeper into the lie. So, I started asking about Ryan, the guy she'd mentioned who was also expecting a baby. I wanted to know more about him since she'd been talking about him so much. What was his wife's name? When was their due date? Had she met them outside of class? That's when Adelaide started getting really flustered. She said Ryan was just someone from class that she'd talked to a few times and that she didn't really know much about his personal life. But then she contradicted herself by saying that his wife was worried about complications with her pregnancy, which meant she'd have to know personal details. I kept pressing for more information about Ryan and Adelaide was getting more and more agitated. Finally, she snapped and asked why I was interrogating her about people from her yoga class, like she was on trial or something. She said it felt like I didn't trust her and that she didn't understand why I was being so suspicious about her prenatal activities. That's when I decided to stop playing around. I told Adelaide that I knew she hadn't been going to any yoga classes. I knew that the charges on our credit card were fake, and I knew that she had been lying to me about where she'd been spending her afternoons. Adelaide went completely silent for about 10 seconds. Then she tried to deny everything and said I was being paranoid and controlling. She insisted that she had been going to yoga and that there must be some misunderstanding about the credit card charges. She even offered to call the studio right then to prove she was telling the truth. So I called her bluff. I told her to go ahead and call them. I wanted to speak to Maria myself and get this all cleared up. Adelaide started backtracking immediately, saying that she didn't have the studio's number with her and that she'd have to look it up later. That's when I told Adelaide that I knew about Ryan, not just that he was in her yoga class, but that she'd been spending her afternoons at his apartment, that I knew they'd been planning this whole scheme together for months. Adelaide's entire demeanor changed. The fake confusion and hurt feelings disappeared, and she got this cold, calculating look. She asked me exactly what I thought I knew and demanded to see my evidence. I told her about the Discord conversation I'd overheard, how I'd heard her laughing about what an easy mark I was, and how they'd planned the pregnancy timing to sabotage my Tokyo opportunity, how she'd been moving my paycheck money into accounts I didn't have access to and planning to disappear after the baby was born. Adelaide listened to this whole explanation without saying a word. When I finished, she sat there for a moment and then started laughing. Not nervous laughter, but genuine amusement. She told me that she was actually impressed that I'd figured it out because she hadn't given me credit for being that observant. Then Adelaide said something that made me realize she was even worse than I'd thought. She told me that yes, everything I'd said was true, but that I only had myself to blame for being stupid enough to fall for it. She said I'd been so eager to play the responsible boyfriend that I'd made it easy for them to take advantage of me. Adelaide explained that she'd started dating me specifically because her friend had told her I was getting a big promotion and inheritance from my grandmother. She'd researched me online, found out about my family's money, and decided I was worth the effort. The pregnancy wasn't an accident or even just about sabotaging Tokyo. It was about securing long-term financial support from someone she considered a complete pushover. She told me that Ryan had been her boyfriend for over a year before she'd even met me. They'd been planning this kind of scam with different targets until they found out how much money I had access to. Adelaide said they'd specifically chosen the pregnancy angle because men like me always fell for the responsible father act. But here's the part that really got to me. Adelaide said that even if I exposed their whole plan, it didn't matter because she was still going to get child support from me whether the baby was mine or not. She'd already consulted with lawyers about paternity laws and found out that if my name went on the birth certificate, I'd be legally responsible regardless of DNA tests. Adelaide told me she'd been forging my signature on various documents for months, and that there were financial obligations tied to my name that I didn't even know about yet, insurance policies, loan applications, even apartment applications in other states. She said I could try to fight it in court, but that it would take years and cost me more than just paying the support. Then she really twisted the knife. Adelaide said that turning down Tokyo was just the beginning and that I was going to keep making sacrifices for her and Ryan's future, whether I wanted to or not. She'd made sure that my credit and finances were tied to theirs in ways that would take years to untangle. Adelaide stood up from the table and told me that I could be angry about it if I wanted, but that the smart thing would be to just accept the situation and try to make the best of it. She said that if I cooperated and didn't cause problems, she might even let me have some kind of relationship with the baby. But if I tried to fight them or expose their plan, she'd make sure I lost everything. Then she walked into the bedroom and started making phone calls. I could hear her talking to someone, probably Ryan, telling them that I'd figured everything out, but that it didn't matter because they had me locked in financially anyway. You guys, I just sat there listening to this woman who I'd thought I loved explain how she'd systematically planned to destroy my life, and all I could think about was how wrong she was about having me locked in. Because what Adelaide doesn't know is that while she was setting up her insurance policies and loan applications with my forged signature, I was setting up something much more comprehensive. And on Monday morning, she's going to find out exactly how wrong she was about who's actually in control of this situation. The moving truck arrives at 8 a.m. and by noon everything I own will be on its way to Tokyo. But that's not even the best part. Adelaide thinks she's been playing the long game, but she has no idea that I've been playing an even longer one. Final update. Holy crap. You guys have been following this insanity from the beginning, and I promised you the conclusion would be epic. Well, buckle up because what happened over the last week was beyond anything I could have imagined. And Adelaide and Ryan are currently dealing with consequences that are going to destroy them for years. So, when we left off, Adelaide had just confessed everything and told me I was trapped in their scheme, whether I liked it or not. She spent the rest of Friday evening on the phone with Ryan, probably planning how to handle me now that I knew the truth. What she didn't realize is that I was 3 steps ahead of her the entire time. Saturday morning, I woke up early and started phase 3 of my plan. Remember how Adelaide mentioned she'd been forging my signature on documents? Well, I'd suspected that for weeks and had been documenting every single instance I could find, bank statements, insurance applications, even rental agreements for that apartment in another state she thought I didn't know about. I spent Saturday morning at the police station filing reports for identity theft and signature forgery. Turns out when someone forges your signature on financial documents, that's a serious crime regardless of your relationship status. The officer I spoke with was really interested in all the evidence I'd collected, especially the recordings I'd made of Adelaide admitting to the forgeries. But here's where I really got strategic. Remember Ryan? I'd been doing some research on him too. Turns out our boy Ryan was living in a rental house that belonged to his aunt. And guess who was the emergency contact and co-signer on his lease? His aunt, Jean, who happened to be a very religious woman who definitely wouldn't approve of her nephew's scheme to defraud someone out of their inheritance. So, I made a little visit to Jean on Saturday afternoon, brought along printouts of Ryan's Discord messages that I'd managed to capture along with evidence of Adelaide's fake pregnancy timeline and their whole plan. Jean was furious when she realized what Ryan had been doing while living in her property. She told me she was going to have a very serious conversation with Ryan and that there would be consequences for his behavior. Sunday morning, the moving truck showed up right on schedule. Adelaide came out of the bedroom around 8 a.m. to find 3 guys loading all my furniture into a truck. She started screaming at me about what I was doing and demanding an explanation. I calmly told her that since she'd made it clear our relationship was over, I was moving out. Adelaide tried to argue that I couldn't just take everything without discussing it with her first. But here's the beautiful part. Every single item those movers packed was either something I'd owned before we moved in together or something I could prove I'd paid for with my own money. Adelaide had no legal claim to any of it. She kept demanding to know where I was going and when I'd be back. I told her I was relocating for work and that she'd need to figure out her own living situation since the lease was in my name and I wasn't renewing it. That's when Adelaide realized that in 30 days she was going to be homeless unless she could qualify for her own apartment. Adelaide started panicking and called Ryan to come over immediately. He showed up around 10 a.m. looking absolutely terrible, like he hadn't slept all night. Turns out his Aunt Jean had indeed had that serious conversation with him and it hadn't gone well for Ryan at all. Jean had kicked him out of the house effective immediately and told him she never wanted to see him again. She'd also called his parents and his employer to let them know exactly what kind of person he was. Ryan was currently sleeping in his car and had nowhere to go. When Ryan saw the moving truck, he realized the full scope of what was happening. He started yelling at me about how I was ruining their lives and how they'd invested months in planning their future together. I just looked at him and told him that actions have consequences and that maybe he should have thought about that before deciding to defraud someone. That's when Adelaide and Ryan both started getting really desperate. They offered to call off their whole plan if I'd just stay and work things out. Adelaide said she'd been confused about her feelings, but that she realized now that she wanted to be with me, not Ryan. Ryan tried to convince me that the whole thing had been Adelaide's idea and that he'd just gotten caught up in it. But I was done listening to their lies. I told them both that I knew exactly what they'd been planning and that it was too late to undo the damage they'd caused. Adelaide asked what I meant by that, so I explained about the police reports I'd filed and how forgery was a criminal offense that could result in serious charges. Adelaide went white and started insisting that she'd never forged anything, that there must be some misunderstanding. But I pulled out copies of the documents with her fake versions of my signature alongside real examples of my actual signature. The differences were obvious, even to someone without handwriting analysis training. Ryan started blaming Adelaide for being sloppy with the forgeries and said he'd told her they should have been more careful. Adelaide turned on him and started screaming about how this was his fault, for pressuring her to move faster with their timeline. They were literally falling apart and turning on each other right there in front of me. By noon, everything I owned was packed and on its way to a storage facility near the airport. I had a flight to Tokyo scheduled for Tuesday morning and just needed to tie up the last few loose ends. Adelaide kept begging me to stay and work things out, promising that she'd end things with Ryan and that we could start over. But I had one more surprise for them. Remember that inheritance house I'd mentioned? Well, it turns out Adelaide had been planning to claim that property as part of our joint assets when she filed for support payments. She'd even filled out paperwork listing herself as my common-law spouse with rights to my inherited property. The problem with that plan is that I'd already transferred the house into a trust that she couldn't touch, and I'd documented all her attempts to fraudulently claim ownership. When Adelaide found out that the house she'd been counting on was completely out of her reach, she absolutely lost it. Adelaide started screaming about how I'd ruined everything and how she'd spent months setting up their future plans. She said I was being vindictive and cruel for destroying something that had taken them so long to arrange. I just told her that she should have thought about the risks before deciding to target someone who wasn't as stupid as she thought. Monday morning, I got on my flight to Tokyo while Adelaide was dealing with the fallout from everything that had happened. But the best part was still to come. See, Adelaide and Ryan thought they still had access to that joint savings account with the $12K from my paychecks. What they didn't know is that I'd contested every single deposit as unauthorized since Adelaide had obtained access to my paycheck information through deception. My company's legal department had been very interested in the evidence I'd provided about Adelaide's fraud scheme, especially since it involved forged documents related to my employment. They'd worked with my bank to reverse all the transfers and recover every penny that had been moved into accounts I hadn't personally authorized. Tuesday afternoon, while I was settling into my new apartment in Tokyo, Adelaide came home to find eviction notices on the door and all her belongings packed into garbage bags on the curb. The landlord had accelerated the eviction process once he learned about the police reports for fraud and forgery. Adelaide was now facing criminal charges, had no place to live, and had lost access to all the money she'd been counting on. The really beautiful part is that Ryan was in the same situation. His aunt had made sure that every rental application he submitted got rejected by calling the landlords and explaining his character. He couldn't find anywhere to live, had lost his job due to his aunt's phone calls, and was completely broke since all their shared resources had been recovered by my legal team. Wednesday evening, my phone started blowing up with messages from Adelaide. She'd gotten my number from somewhere and was sending me text after text begging me to help her. She said she was sorry for everything and that she'd learned her lesson. She claimed she was pregnant and alone and didn't know what to do. But here's the thing that Adelaide still didn't understand. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt or betrayed or seeking revenge. I was just completely done with both of them. So, I sent her one single text message back telling her to call Ryan for help since he was the actual father of her baby. And then I blocked her number. Adelaide tried reaching me through social media, email, even LinkedIn. Every message was more desperate than the last. She was staying in some motel and running out of money fast. Ryan had apparently disappeared completely and she couldn't find him anywhere. She was facing felony charges for the forgeries and couldn't afford a lawyer. The last message I saw before blocking her everywhere was Adelaide begging me to at least send her enough money for rent somewhere. She said she'd do anything to make this right and that she'd spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I just help her get back on her feet. You know what I did with that message? I screenshot it and sent it to Ryan's last known email address with a note saying that his baby mama needed financial support and maybe he should step up and take responsibility for his kid. It's been 2 weeks now and I'm absolutely loving life in Tokyo. The job is incredible. The city is amazing and I'm making more money than I ever dreamed of. Meanwhile, Adelaide and Ryan are dealing with criminal charges, eviction records that will make it nearly impossible to find housing and complete financial ruin that's going to follow them for years. The best part is that everything I did was completely legal and justified. I didn't have to break any laws or do anything unethical. I just stopped being a pushover and started protecting my own interests instead of letting them take advantage of me. Adelaide thought she was so clever targeting someone she saw as weak and manipulable. She thought she'd found the perfect mark who would just roll over and let her destroy his life. But she made one crucial mistake. She underestimated exactly how strategic I could be when someone tried to play games with my future. So to anyone listening who might be dealing with manipulative people trying to take advantage of them, here's my advice. Don't get mad. Don't get emotional. Just get methodical, document everything, plan your moves carefully, and never let anyone convince you that you have to accept being treated badly. Adelaide and Ryan are probably going to spend the next few years dealing with the consequences of their choices while I'm building an incredible career in one of the most exciting cities in the world. Sometimes the best revenge really is just refusing to let terrible people drag you down to their level. Thanks for following this whole crazy journey on Hidden Lies. You guys gave me the confidence to stand up for myself and not let these people destroy my life.